Episode 3 First Fights. Depending on who your godly parent is, where you live, and sometimes rotten luck, your first monster could be city block massive or chihuahua sized. As I promised, this podcast isn't just a Calyx Carter story. I'll also be teaching you how to defend yourself in a fight against the monster. For this particular episode, I have a few uncommon ones lined up. For those of you who don't know, my name is Calyx Carter. I'm the daughter of the Greek goddess Athena, and I started making these podcasts because of a dream from her. It's because I'm her child that monsters are after me, and I'm sure you share the same sentiments. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm starting with 2 uncommon monsters. The reason is, it's the uncommon monsters you'll have the most trouble with. From the most notable Greek myths, you'll recall that cutting off the Hydra's head means 2 more will grow back in its place, unless you burn the stump of the head immediately after cutting it off. But what would you do if you saw a Catoblepas headed your way? My guess? You have no clue. Probably never even heard of it. Well, neither had my girlfriend, and it was the very first monster she ever faced. Aurora is the daughter of Apollo. She came to camp a year before I did, but because she's older than me, technically she got here the same age I did. So, at 12 years old, her whole life changed. Prior to this encounter, monsters had always been on her tail. A satyr named Johnny kept her safe, even when she moved around schools, always finding a reasonable excuse as to why he showed up at the same school she was transferred to. On the topic of satyrs, expect an episode from my dad very soon about how very important they are for demigods. Despite that not being the case for me. Anyway, it was summer break, and she had been volunteering at a music camp. Similarly to Camp Half-Blood, this camp featured a weekly game of Capture the Flag, though without weapons and monsters. Aurora, alongside Johnny, had been tasked to go into the woods to set it up. They came across a Catoblepas in a clearing a ways away from their camp setup. A Catoblepas is something that looks like a water buffalo. It's brown, with shaggy fur covering the top of its head and wrapping around its neck like a scarf. It has a scaly back and shaggy eyebrows. The head seems to be so heavy that the beast can only look down, and protruding from its mouth are 2 sets of tusks, twisted like gnarled tree trunks. It can range anywhere from 4 to 8.5 feet tall. Yet, at first, this thing wasn't after Aurora and Johnny. Catoblepas are very docile and sluggish creatures. If you'll recall from my earlier podcasts, some monsters only attack if you wander too close to their territory. These water buffalo monsters are the same way. By the time Johnny caught on to the scent and the 2 had seen the monster, it was too late, and they were too close. Only, even Johnny had no clue what this beast was. It wasn't anything he'd seen before. Lesson number 1. Do not look a Catoblepas in the eye. Though its head hangs so low that it's mostly facing the ground, when it's in attack mode, its yellow eyes are easy to spot, and the monster moves very quickly, sometimes like a charging bull. Looking into its eyes, as Aurora grew quite familiar with, causes immediate results, and depending on how long you look it in the eye, the worse it gets. 10 seconds may result in a very bad, feverish symptom. Dizziness, vomiting, basically a bad case of the flu. Any more than that, 10 seconds could lead to death. Lesson 2. Do not get too close. The breath is a gaseous poison that can't always be seen by the human eye. This is a result of their main diet being poisonous plants. So, give them a wide berth. If not for the poison, for their quick charge. Lesson 3. Catoblepas can be killed. How? A touch of Imperial Gold. No cut needed, which is good because we all know what happens if you get too close. But unfortunately, you probably won't have any of this precious metal in your pockets. Celestial bronze will bounce right off. Lesson 4. Catoblepas can be killed, but because you probably don't have anything to kill it with, running and hiding is a very safe bet. Though running is good to sprint behind something, I recommend not running too far. The longer you run, the more the Catoblepas will perceive you as a threat, and will chase after you. Dash behind something, and in about 30 seconds to a minute, if it hasn't seen you, it usually gives up and wanders away. As for Aurora, Johnny had to drag her behind a thick brush of bushes, covering her mouth in an attempt to lessen her coughing. If you do look these things in the eyes, have some ambrosia or nectar on hand. It can be the difference between life and death. So you see, it's some of the more dangerous monsters you've never heard about that could ultimately be your downfall. This next monster is no exception. Scolopendra. Yes, a weird name, and an even weirder looking monster. It closely resembles an anglerfish. You know, the medium-sized one with the underbite and the light dangling in front of its face. Instead of light, though, it just connects back into its head like some weird handle on its forehead. The Scolopendra has hairy nostrils and a flat, crayfish-like tail and rows of webbed feet lining its flanks. Did I mention it's the largest sea monster? I had the privilege of meeting this monster with the rest of camp when it appeared in the Long Island Sound last summer. A lot of stuff like this apparently happens all year at camp, though I've only ever been a summer camper until this year. My dad had asked me to stay here year-round this year for reasons he wouldn't disclose, so maybe I'll have more horrifying but kind of cool stories to share soon. Anyway, a package arrived to camp addressed to the Hermes cabin, so we figured, hey, this is probably a gift from Hermes. Because that's not something that happens every day, we opened it at the campfire. You know those little capsules that you put in glasses of water that turn into little sponge dinosaurs? It was one of those, about the size of my thumb, that Freddy in the Hermes cabin thought would be a good idea to drop right into the Sound. As I'm sure you can imagine, that morning we woke to a black, churning sea and a very horrifying dark shadow swimming under it. Suffice to say, it wasn't Hermes who sent the package, but we still have no clue who did. With the help of Chiron, my cabin helped discover what it was, only to find there really wasn't much about it. Scolopendra is the child of Keto and Four Keys. It's a water monster, and that's it. It was fought in recent history, but for some reason there were no recorded weaknesses, and we couldn't ask anyone who was there because they simply weren't around anymore. The whole camp pitched in ideas, though the Athena cabin dominated the researching aspect. With the help of the Ares campers, we reached the simple solution that might not have even worked. It required two things: our resident child of Poseidon and a child of Zeus. Only there currently aren't any children of Zeus at camp. When disaster strikes a camp, every demigod joins the fight. If you make it here, you need to have each other's backs, and know that others have yours. We're a family here, and we fight as a team. We didn't have a child of Zeus, but we did have an aforementioned child of Ares with an electric staff and a whole cabin of engineers. The Hephaestus cabin whipped something up within a day, which was good, because it seemed the longer we waited, the bigger Scolopendra grew, meaning the more water flooded camp. We learned very quickly that coming in contact with the water was a bad idea, and Tiana, a daughter of Demeter who'd barely gotten splashed by a wave when she'd gotten a bit too close to Fireworks Beach, was rushed to the camp infirmary with what appeared to be acid burns. Anyway, because this camper's spear had been a gift from her father, the electricity running through it was divine. The Hephaestus kids built around it, metal rods encased with runes from the Hecate cabin, in an almost spherical shape, the spear jutting from it at the top. Here was the plan. You know how you're not supposed to drop a plugged-in hairdryer into your water-filled bathtub while you're in it, because you might get electrocuted? We hoped a similar phenomena would work for Scolopendra. Our in-house child of Poseidon used his powers to summon the black water, he and the rest of us at camp standing far back from the approaching water level. The black water coiled around the metal sphere, the spear charged and crackling, and, just like a toy, tossed it into the water. The reaction was very quick, and very bright. Mostly everyone had to shield their eyes from the glow that arose. And then, just as quickly as it had come, it was gone. The water was blue and calm, like not a single bad thing had happened. As opposed to a Catoblepas, I don't expect you to run into Scolopendra. My point with its story is that there might simply not be a known way to kill a monster, and you need to improvise. Like majorly improvise. Except, a lot of you are on your own, and don't have talent to borrow from other demigods of different parents. Some of you will need to learn to improvise on your own. Remember to watch your backs, take care of yourselves, and if you survive, I'll see you again next week. Calyx out.